Thank you everyone for organising, and it's great to take part in this event remotely, and it's my pleasure to provide a brief outline and introduction to UKRN, to the UK Reproducibility Network. So I'm wearing my UKRN hat on today during this talk. So it will be very factual in a sense. I'll just talk about the structure and vision for the network and some practical information to outline what we're trying to do. So complementing effectively information that you've heard from various speakers this morning. Some key resources. There's a brief paper that we published earlier this year, which outlines.
Laura, sorry to interrupt you. I think you just need to share your slides. If you want to share slides. Okay. Yes, you've got there. So,
okay.
AVT.
I'll start over then.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. These things happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, so I'll just start with some key resources. So this is there's a paper here that we published earlier this year, which outlines the vision for UKRN. It's a short paper. I would recommend reading that. There's a very active Twitter account at UK Reproducibility, which is run by Marcus Munafo, and there is also a website. Exciting news is that we have a new website at that URL that I've posted here, going live tomorrow. If you go there now, it's down because the team in Bristol are working very hard to make sure everything's in shape for the launch tomorrow. But so you'll be able to access all the links from there once from the slides. But as I said, if you go to the website today, you won't be able to see it. I point you to the terms of reference on the website, which outline the structure of UKRN, and this is an evolving document in the sense that it changes as we change and grow the network. And we also have a code of conduct, and I would point you to that as well, because this effectively regulates how we interact within UKRN in a way that our events and activities are friendly and open and inclusive to all. The vision for UKRN is for the UK to lead the world in conducting and promoting rigorous research. So this is effectively our tagline. And I'll give you a very brief sense of the temporal development of UKRN. Largely to outline that we're a very new organization, and so we are making things up as we go along in the best possible way, in the sense that we are again evolving our practices and looking for funding as the network grows. So this shapes much of what we do. So Marcus Munafo called an informal meeting at the University of Bristol in September 2018, and we were really overwhelmed by the response at that point, such that the network effectively launched in March 2019 when we held the first annual meeting of UKRN at King's College London. We announced the first 10 member institutions that joined the network in December last year, and I'll talk more about this later. And we had our second annual meeting in Oxford this year in March. And the exciting development, which will be announced soon, is that we are now working with colleagues in different countries to establish networks in other areas. So effectively, we are exporting the UKRN model to other parts of the world, which is very exciting. In brief, the UKRN is a peer-led consortium with activities that span multiple levels, including researchers, institutions, and other stakeholders within the research ecosystem. We very much want to frame all of the issues that we've heard about in the morning, so the different questionable research practices and biased incentives and problems that we have in the practice of research as an opportunity that we have to improve the culture and practice of research. And we aim to do this in a collaborative way, both within the UK, but also internationally. So working collaboratively rather than competitively. And we strive as much as possible for broad disciplinary representation. For example, in our wording, we focus on open research so that our remit is clearly not limited to STEM and science disciplines. That's why we favour wording such as open research rather than open science. And the reason for that is that there is growing interest in issues surrounding reproducibility across disciplines. This is some data from a paper by Goodman et al. That was published in 2016, and it simply tracked the number of papers across different fields that include a term relating to reproducibility. And so at the bottom in the sort of different shades of orange is maths, computer science and engineering. And at the very top in the different shades of red are the social sciences, arts and humanities. And green are the medical sciences and neuroscience and psychology. So of course, as you can see, there is more interest in this area, more attention to these topics in the biomedical sciences, but it is the interest is growing also in other fields, and that's why we think it's important that the remit of UKRN is interdisciplinary and broad. Now, of course, that raises the question of what the R in UKRN stands for and what reproducibility means. And of course, there are many ways to define these concepts. It's there is a lot of variation both within and between subjects. And so loosely, we've adopted the framework proposed by Goodman and et al. In the same paper, where they focus on reproducibility, not because it's the best term, but simply because it is the term that most people recognize. And they distinguish between three levels. The first level being methods reproducibility, which is the provision of enough detail about a study's procedure and data so that the study can be exactly repeated. And this is distinct from results reproducibility, which is where researchers, either the original authors or different team, can obtain the same results by conducting an independent study where procedures are closely matched to the original experiment or study. And these two aspects are separate from a third concept, which they call inferential reproducibility, which is perhaps the one that we don't talk about very much or as much as these others. And this relates to drawing consistent conclusions from analysis or replication, but also from studies that are completely independent, using different methods. And the key, I think, that is driving our efforts within UKRN is that if we can solve the issues of methods and results reproducibility by improving the training, then we can focus as researchers on the inferential reproducibility, because this is where the interesting intellectual advances happen. So if we can stop quibbling about whether your study is computationally reproducible or not, because we provide scientists and researchers more broadly with the correct training, then we can focus on the important and interesting stuff effectively. So this is broadly the framework that we adopt. As I said, different people use different terms, but this is loosely what the R in UKRN stands for. In terms of organisation, the core of UKRN is our local networks. These are networks of student researchers and staff who develop and promote UKRN related activity at 46 institutions across the UK. These are typically self-organising grassroots networks, which are led by local network leads. So, for example, in Oxford, we have Reproducible Research Oxford, which is the local network of UKRN, and this is coordinated by my colleague Malika Ile, and she is the local network lead for Oxford. For example, at King's, Sam Westwood would be the local network lead, and he coordinates the King's Open Research Group activity, which puts together a number of different initiatives, including the Right Science Club and, of course, this conference. So these are just some examples. Now, in addition to the local networks, late last year we launched this different way of engaging with institutions by having institutions sign up formally to the network. And what you can see there is that not all institutions that have a local network have are formally affiliated with UKRN. We currently have 15 institutions that have formally joined since late last year. And these institutions have committed to appointing an academic lead for research improvement from within their senior management team. The idea here is that the academic lead will work in collaboration with the local network if there is one in that institution, but the two are independent by design, because we want the sort of bottom-up activities led by the local network and a sort of top-down efforts led by the institutions to be independent, of course, and sort of collaborative but independent. In addition to the local networks and the member institutions, we have a stakeholder engagement group. This includes 31 to latest count between funders, publishers, learned societies, professional bodies and other organizations in the broader research ecosystem. And you can find the full list or updated list on the UKRN website when this goes live tomorrow. The stakeholders provide support for UKRN activity, either generally by providing funds or for specific activities. And in particular, we distinguish between full members, which are the stakeholders that provide financial support. And these are typically funders and learned societies. And then we have a separate category of affiliate members, and these are stakeholders providing in-kind, support in kind. So typically these are publishers, for example, so that we can who may, for example, support a specific event so that we can keep separate from for-profit companies, for example. And the aim by bringing the stakeholders into the conversations is to enable the feedback between them and the research community in a constructive way, because of course stakeholders such as publishers have their own incentives which may be different from the incentives of academics, for example, and so we want to make sure that these are aligned as much as possible. And so this is what UKRN is trying to do by bringing everybody to the table. In terms of coordination, UKRN is coordinated by a steering group, which includes Marcus Manafo as the chair, and Chris Chambers, Alex Collins, myself, Nicola Jans, and Malcolm MacLeod. And I've added here the disciplines, not for you to read them all, but just to showcase that we really have tried to, as much as possible, include in the steering group some diversity in terms of disciplinary focus in line with our remit. And we are ably assisted by an advisory board, which is chaired by Dorothy Bishop, together with 8 international members, ranging all the way from PhD student to senior professor. And in fact, Anna Scheel, who will be speaking after me, I think, she is on the advisory board and as a PhD student. So we really try and have this diversity of career stage and role advising us in how we go forward with our activities. Now, I'll give you some brief examples of activities that we support, and there are really 2 categories. One category are activities that were developed from within UKRN, and so one such as the open research primers, which Sam mentioned just now, and these are short primers on 5 different topics that were crowdsourced by members of the UKRN community and beyond. And these are available from our website, so they'll be available when the website goes live tomorrow. There are other activities that we have effectively adopted. So these activities predate UKRN, but we have formed collaborations so that with them, so that we can effectively support one another. And one is, for example, Register Report. This is an initiative led by Chris Chambers and David Meller and others at the Center for Open Science, which, as you may know, is a journal article format where the introduction and methods are effectively submitted to the journal and peer reviewed and possibly accepted by the journal in principle before the research is actually conducted. So as I said, this is an initiative that predates UKRN, but we've effectively adopted it as one of our initiatives. And similarly, we have adopted reproducibility, which was started by Amy Orban, Sam Parsons and Sophia Creval here at Oxford, but has now gone international, and they have chapters in many different countries. They retain ownership of the initiative, and UKRN provides what support we can, both financial support, but also some logistic support. There are some additional initiatives listed and activities listed in the paper that I mentioned earlier at the top of the slide, but the up-to-date list will be on the website. So I would encourage you to look at that, but also if you do lead or are involved in an activity that UKRN may sponsor or support, then please do get in touch. That's all from me in terms of outline. I will point you again to those key resources, and also I want to bring to your attention a conference that will be held in September online now, co-organized by the Wellcome Genome Campus and UKRN on reproducibility, replicability and trust in science.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Laura. We have the first question, which is, as a non-UK ECR, I was wondering if there should be a WWRN, Worldwide Reproducibility Network, and what can I do to make it happen?
That's absolutely, I think we are aiming for world domination, not really, but so as I said, we have been working with colleagues, and Marcus has been leading on this from our end to expand networks to other countries. And so slowly, I think, or not so slowly, those will come. I think as an ECR, one good way to start may be, depending on how much, so I don't know where the question comes from geographically, but for example, one way to get started is to start a reproducibility journal club at the institution if there isn't one, and that's a way to catalyze interest and activity. And then we found that often interest bubbles up from these networks, from these grassroots networks, and so that might be a way to start.
Wonderful. I'm just going to take this opportunity to make a shout out to Charlotte Cartwright and Chris Chambers, who obviously head the Open Science or Open Research Working Groups. I wonder whether you could just say a little bit more about those, Laura.
Yeah, so that is an activity that also predates or was set up by Chris initially, and with Charlotte at around the same time as UKRN, and again, that's an activity that we have adopted, and so those are international, I believe, so that could be another way of bringing attention to these topics, and so there is a very well-resourced OSF page, for example, that people can consult to see what networks are there and what activities are available.
Wonderful. Yes, and so at King's, I set up the King's Open Research Group initiative, which had the pleasing shortening of being called Corgi. So we have plastered logos of that everywhere. So if you are interested, you should be able to just search for it. We do have an OSF page as well, which we can share the link to. So it is a really nice idea to exert sort of change from sort of senior academics as well as the sort of grassroots, which obviously reproducibility does so very well. So the next question is sort of a comment, but I don't know whether you want to expand on it. But so they say, I'm very interested in what I can do for this initiative as an ECR. I'm also stationed in Northern Ireland, so I would be very happy to spread awareness of the UKRN in this area. So that's nice. But when I attended the meeting in January last year, or March last year, the first meeting, there was keen interest in sort of almost taking the model of the UKRN and sort of having it adopted in Europe, but also across the world. And I wondered whether you could sort of comment on, if anybody is stationed, you know, outside the UK, what they can do to learn from how the UKRN was built up and what they can point to show that this is something to get behind and there's traction.
Yeah, so this is the work that Marcus has been leading on with colleagues in other countries to set up these international networks. And so I think mainly what we can offer is share our experience. So, for example, all the documents that we have developed over the years in terms of our terms of reference, but also the structure that we put in place, which then needs to be adapted to local circumstances. So again, if anybody is interested in expanding beyond our current reach, then please feel free to get in touch, and we'll direct any requests as we can. I don't think that we have a network in Northern Ireland, and it'd be a local network, and it'd be wonderful to add that. So again, be great if people who are interested in organising those or starting one of those, if there isn't one at your institution, please feel free to get in touch. These vary greatly in terms of organisation. So some initiatives are much more mature. So certainly what Sam has set up at King's, for example, has now been going going for a number of months, years. So they're very mature, but in other institutions, they're relatively small and newer, and it could just be, you know, getting together for a journal club or organising one event a year. So those are very, very flexible, and so there is also the flexibility based on the resources that are available. But as I said, if anybody's interested in starting a local chapter, whichever form, linked to UKRN, then again, please get in touch, and we'll make sure we support you however we can.
Wonderful, that's great. There's one question I have, which is sort of one from, so I attended a talk by Marcus. He gave it at the British Neuroscience Association earlier this year, no, later last year, and it was on the ref and reproducibility and never the twain shall meet. And the general feeling from the audience was that there was a sort of a kind of a universal hostility to what they view as being sort of the institutions that have been imposed this kind of culture on us. And I mean, I can't put words into Marcus's mouth, and I don't know whether he's still with us, but I think the general attitude is that the UKRN tries to involve as many voices in the conversation as without pitting people against each other, and that's sort of seen in your or stakeholders or whatever word you want to use to label the sort of interested parties. And I wonder if you could just give volume to why it's important to sort of obviously have that kind of equality of voices from different viewpoints.
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely the way we try and operate, because, you know, universities will develop procedures to respond to the pressures that are coming, and so we want to make sure that those procedures are not some sort of top-down thing that is imposed on researchers, but that researchers' voice can really inform how those procedures develop. So, for example, in many institutions, UKRN in one way or other is involved in conversations. We are involved in conversation at Oxford, for example, through our local chapter, through Reproducible Research Oxford, in discussions with how the university is slowly changing its hiring and promotion criteria. So it's very important that these procedures then develop independently from the researchers, and definitely this shapes very much what we do within UKRN.
Wonderful. It's really nice to see such a sort of broad strokes kind of approach, because I think that there is an issue in this. When you are trying to reform, it's difficult to sort of deliver a message that you're not kind of trying to impose these changes. It's more, what can we do to make things better, which is the whole purpose of this conference, really, is to suggest ways that we can to pose solutions. I just want to just finish on one thing. We will finish a bit early, but I think we will just take advantage of a break so people can get an extra cup of coffee to fortify themselves for the rest of the afternoon. But I just wanted to bring up something that came up at the recent UKRN meeting, which is this idea of sort of replacing science in a way with research. And you made a sort of funny comment that one of your first jobs when you was involved with the UKRN is sort of scrub the science from. I don't know whether you want to sort of tell the joke yourself, but I just wanted to finish on that, of trying to make research more broadly than this sort of focus on science.
Yeah, so I think the joke that Sam hinted at is that I think in the early days of UKRN, one of my jobs I felt was to scan all documents as a social scientist on the team, was to scan all documents to make sure that we replaced open science with open research, again in this sort of sense of inclusivity. And so we made efforts, for instance, to reach out to research councils within the UK that fund social science research as well as humanities research. So the ESRC and AHRC are both stakeholders, and I think it is important to bring all disciplines to the table, partly because then we can have a joint approach to the reforms that we need to implement, for example, within institutions in terms of promotion and so on, but also because there is a lot that we can learn from how different disciplines do things. Different disciplines have strengths in different areas, and so it's really a case of not reinventing the wheel, where we can draw on expertise that is well established in a different field and bring it to our own field and vice versa. And so for example, the Oxford Reproducibility, which is very active, has been very successful in bringing together mostly early career researchers from psychology with researchers from early career researchers from other departments, and that conversation has been very fruitful. So we hope to do this on a larger scale effect.
Yeah. Well, I've just noticed there's a flurry of new questions coming in. I guess there's a sort of lag, so I will just pinch a bit more of your time. So we have one question here, which is, are we able to join these networks as PhD students, or is it just for ECR and higher?
Absolutely, everybody, PhD students and the graduate students. So I think the thing to do is to, as the website goes live tomorrow, check the website, so the new website, and you'll find all the information on the slides that will be available on the OSF for the conference. And so check if there is a local network at your institution. And if there isn't, then you may pull together a few colleagues and see whether you can start one. And as I said, you don't need much by way of resources, and we can have a conversation about how we can support your efforts. These networks really are very informal and really open to anyone. So students at any level, but also researchers, and so postdocs, as well as more established academics, but also research staff, so technicians or colleagues who work in research support. For example, the ones who help with submission of grants. It's really important, again, to bring them in the conversation as well. So really anybody who has an interest in these topics is welcome to join. And we encourage, of course, junior colleagues to do so as well, because they are the next generation that can really help us spread the word.
Wonderful. We have another question here that's getting quite a bit of attention, which is from Becky Kendall. Do you have anyone from outside the academic world collaborating with you and advising?
So we do have some colleagues from industry on the advisory board, for instance. And then in terms of our stakeholders, those are drawn from within the academic environment mostly, but again, you know, they're not necessarily strictly academic. There are funders who funders that work as, you know, as charities, for example. So they have an interface with research, but not strictly academic.
Great, and we have another one from Daniel. So we heard so much about incentives this morning. I wonder if Laura could comment on how receptive senior colleagues have been to this initiative. For example, the SMT members who sit on each local committee.
SMT members?
I'm not sure. Is it senior management team, maybe?
I'm not sure what that refers to. I think I'll speak from sort of my experience here at Oxford. So I've been active in this area for 5-6 years now, and I found colleagues who have been wonderful, senior colleagues who have been wonderful, receptive. Dorothy Bishop, chiefly among them, but several other colleagues who are very interested and active and supportive. Other colleagues are not aware, for example, of these topics. Or concerns that early career researchers and students may have. So I think it's quite mixed, and I suspect it varies a lot by discipline as well. But again, you know, the key is to work with the colleagues who are receptive, and that's certainly what we've been doing here in Oxford. We've been able to bring together people from across the university who's very passionate about these things.
Okay, so we will finish a few minutes ahead of time. Let me just quickly check the Q&A, see if we've got any new ones coming in. I don't think we do. So, oh no, we do actually. We've got a few that have just come in. So it's more of a comment. There's Grace Gottlieb from UCL. Forgive me for pronouncing this name incorrectly, but it's Gesh Hubner and colleagues at UCL have done a lot of great work to adapt existing life science tools for other disciplines, including energy research. So it might be a good chance to sort of connect with the UKRN then to sort of promote that that stuff, unless they're already sort of in communication with you. I'm not sure about that. The next one is, the next question is, are there any links between you and the BPS?
I believe they are Marcus can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they are a stakeholder. And so we have tried with some learned societies to work with them, and it's early days still, but to work, for example, in curriculum reform. Yeah, so I believe BPS in particular are a stakeholder. Okay,
wonderful. Right then, so Laura, I think we can wrap up, and you can pop off. I just want to say, you've had quite an ordeal to get here today. So I just, for everybody who doesn't know, organising the conference was nothing compared to sorting out Laura's technical issues. So thank you, Laura, and thank you for your colleague. I forgot her name. What's it?
Malika Ile.
Yes, sorry, her name. So thank you both for organising and helping out with today, and thank you for a lovely talk as well and answering the questions.